Order the meeting of the City of Albany Transportation Commission for Thursday, March 27th, 2025. We'll start with the land acknowledgement. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lisjan. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home.
I'll just note all commissioners are present.
Thank you. Then we will move on to item 2, which is public comment. This is an opportunity for people wanting to address the commission on items that are not on tonight's agenda. Please come forward.
Hi, everybody. Justin Piercy, Kai Piercy from 540 Evelyn Avenue. We love Albany. We love the Greenway. We love riding our bikes on the Greenway a lot. What I don't love is coming across a 70-year-old woman this morning who had apparently a head-on collision with a high schooler on an e-bike, and no idea who was at fault. The high schooler had already left for school. I helped this woman home. And that's, yeah, so on the way home, I'm just thinking, what can be done to create a safer Greenway? I love that everyone's out on the Greenway all the time, kids, older people. And I thought to myself, is there a speed limit on the Greenway? So I got home, called the police department and asked, got a call back, and the officer said, no, well, I think that the quote was, there are no enforceable speed limits. And I didn't really think about that until after I hung up. And I don't know if that meant there's no speed limit on the Greenway, or obviously there are no posted signs to be able to enforce a speed limit. So I'm just asking, at a future meeting, the discussion be proposed to talk about speed limit on the Greenway. That's it. You have anything else?
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Do we have any hands raised online?
We do. Hold on one second. We have one hand raised. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Brian Martin. I sent the commission an email about for the public comment for this agenda item earlier today or last night, and wanted to just hope that I can hear back about the state of sidewalks in the Hill region, Hillside neighborhood, and I don't expect a lot of things tonight. If there's anything people can address with that. Maybe it's well known what's going on with the sidewalks on Albany Hill, the lack of contiguous sidewalks and lack of curb ramps and things like that. And so that would be great to hear back from when people can. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a sidewalk update later tonight, so we perhaps will get a little bit of information on that. Relative to the Greenway speed question, there has been some discussion of that. We're not finally resolved, so very likely that will be coming up again at some point in terms of how we can set and communicate a speed limit effectively there. So it is a good question. All right. No other hands raised online?
No other public comment.
Okay. Very good.
Well, I was just going to provide, I don't know if you watched the last month's meeting. We talked a little bit about, that was when we started our conversation about the speed limits. It wasn't specifically on the agenda. It was related to a topic. So if you want to see what the beginning of that conversation, go and watch that last month's. Yeah, we were talking about how can we communicate speeds and relative speeds and
on pathways.
Yeah, on pathways. Mm-hmm. And Greenway came up specifically.
I just would like to add, we are not allowed to comment very much on items that were not agendized under the Brown Act, so don't feel like we're pushing you off. We just,
Right,
but believe me, we've talked about this before.
yeah.
And I'd just like to add that I'm really sorry that you guys had to watch that.
Yeah, I didn't see it happen, but the aftermath is.
I'm sorry that happened to you.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate your sharing that concern. All
I
right.
had one commissioner question on other public comment that we received in writing about a request for interview from a high school student. If commissioners are interested in talking to them as individuals or as members of the commission but not representing the commission, that is fine. If there's a preference that staff respond, that's fine as well. So just making it clear that you are allowed to communicate with folks, but make it clear that you're doing so, not representing the commission.
Thank you, Justin.
I spoke with the student journalist, and we both gave our disclaimers at the beginning of the phone call. It was great.
We have to formally request if we want you all to respond to them as well, or is that you'll make that decision on your own?
It sounds like there's been response from the commission, so if they're interested in engaging with staff on their article, they're
Okay.
welcome to reach out to us directly.
Okay. Very good. Then we will move on to our next item on the agenda, which is presentations. Monthly police data on collisions and citations, please.
Yes. Give us 1 second. Okay, in the month of February, there were 2 pedestrian-involved collisions. There were 0 bicycle-involved collisions, at least those that were recorded and noted. There were a total of 4 vehicle collisions. There were 3 reported injuries. There were 44 citations given, and there were 0 DUI arrests. And that is the monthly police data from February.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on the police data?
And I would just note that we're going to have a
Yes,
more full conversation about that later.
correct.
And when we do get to that more full conversation, the point that I'd like to sort of query a bit, and perhaps it's appropriate now, is there ever a correlation between the number of collisions and number of citations that occur in the similar location? We can hold that for further discussion, or we can discuss it now. That's my question.
Very good. Right. Our next report out is item 3.2, shared mobility data.
Thank you, Chair. Reporting on data from VO shared scooters. In 2024, quarterly data showed 276 rides in Albany in the first quarter, 532 in the second quarter, 675 in third quarter of 2024, and 734 in the fourth quarter. So there has been an increase over the last year. Trips in Albany. That concludes the report.
Very good. Any questions or comments on that one? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, on to our more unusual report, which is on the bicycle parking inventory, item 3-3.
Just
Just 1 second to set that up as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is, unfortunately, our Civic Spark fellow, Benji Willett, was planning on giving this presentation, but he is out sick. hopefully you'll all have a chance to meet him at some point. And this is a project that has been was initiated a couple months ago. There was a data collection effort in 2012 as part of the 2012 Active Transportation Plan. So this is kind of a refresher on that effort. And next slide. So, and just to note, we pulled this photo from Albany Strollers and Rollers website, so all credit due to Albany Strollers and Rollers on this one. The collection effort included an interactive map, internal interactive map that is new to this project, and there was a detailed analysis conducted, which I'll kind of share out the analysis of. That also was in the memo. The goals of the project were really to identify network coverage gaps for future bike rack installation, to update this data as part of the new active transportation plan, and to inform future bicycle parking policies and ordinances, and potentially guide future investments that are maybe larger than one-off rack installations. Next slide. So there was a combination of online and in-person field surveying, kind of spot checking analysis or methodology done, where staff looked at locations online and then went in person to confirm, or vice versa. We categorized racks by type. These were the primary rack types that you see on the right here. Calculated the available number of parking spaces per rack, and used mapping software to identify specific rack locations throughout the city. So in terms of calculating the number of spaces per rack, there was some conversation about this over in an email received by the commission. We gave our best judgment, and if the commission is interested in thinking about this further, we're happy to reconsider the way that we thought about this. But we really kind of estimated that 2 bicycles fit on kind of more standard racks that would include U-racks, bike-shaped racks, and circle racks. And then, there were the wavy racks, and the racks such as the grid rack would, took a little bit more of an analysis depending on their length. And bike lockers obviously can only fit 1 bike per locker. And then the other types of racks, as you see on the right, are defined here. So that these are the 3 racks that fit into the other category. There may have been 1 or 2 more, but these were the 3 primary other racks. Next slide, please. This is kind of a screenshot of the interactive map, kind of showing the location of all of the racks throughout the city. And it's broken down in the table to the right. So we are currently, by our calculations, at 826 racks throughout the city. Those are racks themselves, not parking spaces. So more parking spaces than that. Next slide, please. So this is a comparison of the 2012 and 2025 data. The 2012 methodology differed from the 2025 methodology in a couple of different ways. Most notably, the methodology kind of categorized racks differently, so that's why you kind of see some confusing categorization there. We did as best we could to kind of lump those that we thought were the same category together and understand it as the data as best we could. And this was our best attempt at understanding that. And, notably, there was a significant increase in available parking between 2012 and 2025, and the methodology may have something to do with that. You'll note that in the other category and in the rack category, there is a decrease in number of parking spaces. That is not likely because any parking spaces or racks were taken out. It's just because of the categorization discrepancies from those two time periods. Next slide, please.
And the other main difference from these numbers to the last slide is because these numbers are showing parking spaces versus numbers of racks, right?
I'm sorry, these are all these spaces, not, the numbers here are all in terms of spaces. So we're trying to, as best we can, to compare apples to apples. Yes, thank you for making that point. So by location, we kind of looked at the main locations or around the city as best we could. And again, this is spaces, not racks, when we're doing the comparison between the two. So at school property, there was an increase in 171 spaces by our, admittedly potentially faulty calculations compared to as you compare the 2 years. The park property, 82 space change. So overall, we had, again, a significant change in the number of spaces between 25 and 2012. Next slide, please. Oh, I actually want to go back to that one slide, sorry. There was also a comment to the commission about University Village and the discrepancy there. We don't know the methodology from the 2012 count. Again, we can maybe surmise that the count was only of on-street parking spaces versus off-street in the village itself, and we included off-street parking spaces kind of within the village as part of this, as part of the 2025 count. So that's why you might see a large jump there. Next slide. And this is just looking, just because Solano's our primary commercial corridor, this is just comparing the two. I think just to note here that there are 41 additional spaces in 2025 as compared to 2012, which is a 27% increase. And again, the categories were slightly different between the two times that we collected this data. And that is it for the on-street bike parking inventory analysis.
Very good, thank you. Any questions from the commissioners?
Sure. What's the plan? What are we going to do with this data? How does this interact with the active transportation planning?
Sure, yeah, so as I mentioned, kind of like the 4 overarching goals at the beginning, I think it's the data is helpful to have regardless, right? Just to have that information so that we know what we're looking at. At some future date, it might be worth doing an occupancy count to understand what the usage is and where the needs are. But I think even before that, understanding where the gaps are in the network and kind of understanding, as we start thinking about where new racks should go throughout the city, if there's a street corner with, 57 racks, that might not be the best place to put a 58th rack. So just kind of being able to have this map in front of us and understand, where the gaps are, and then use this for future kind of, occupancy counts, and then, as I noted before, kind of informing future bicycle parking policies and ordinances will be primary use for this data collection effort.
Other questions?
I'm curious if the University Village numbers include the bike rooms and the new development there?
They do not. So this was all just observed outside. And we did break it down between publicly accessible and publicly inaccessible racks. So we got access to the public schools throughout the city and did counts within the school gates, but those were all outside racks as well. That we counted.
Ben, thank you, that it was, oh, sorry, go ahead.
If I may, I don't actually see the purple dots for the bike lockers on the map. Is that, I'm looking at my computer, I'm looking at the screen, am I missing something, or are they obscured by other dots?
Stellar observation.
Visualization really helpful.
Yeah, they may not be there. It's unclear because it's a hard map to show visually without the interactive version. They may be obscured by other dots, but yeah, I'm looking to try and find where they might be, and it's possible that we just neglected to turn that layer on, or that feature on. So when we took the screenshot of the map, so we'll get a better version to you in the not too distant future. But it's an internal map for now, just so that we can figure out all the kinks.
Commissioner Kerr?
Yeah, just a quick question, Ben. Thank you very much. It's a good presentation. But are there any, does NATCO or does anyone provide any sense of what saturation is or what we need to shoot for? Are there any established standards in terms of what's sufficient parking? Or are we just creating numbers that we don't really know? If we have enough, we're going to add more. But I'm just curious if there's any information on that.
Yeah, that's a good question. So NACTO and several other organizations and agencies provide guidelines as to where to put racks on the street. We follow, for the most part, SFMTA guidelines just because they have incredibly thorough guidelines about where they can be placed and cannot be placed on the street. In terms of where, what a saturation point is or not, I don't think there's any paper that speaks to that I'm aware of, but I think occupancy counts are probably going to be the most telling in terms of understanding that. And there is, a conversation to be had about racks in private properties that will be coming in the not too distant future. And I think that will complement this inventory and help us to come up with a solution to, oversaturation of racks or bikes.
Any other questions? Any questions or comments online?
We have one hand raised. Go ahead.
Hi, it's Brian Martin. Wanted to say, for one thing, thanks for clarifying what the methodology at UC Village and why. That was one of my emailed questions, was to what might be going on there. If I understand you correctly, you think maybe in 2012 they were looking at bike racks maybe directly on or adjacent to this, right on the sidewalks basically, and that you guys were, with this one, we're looking, deeper into the living spaces, but still outdoors. And it sounds like you said it also does not include the things inside the buildings. And then I'm thinking, given that and that some of the other things in the table you said, like some of the categories had a decrease from one year to the next, and you explained tonight that actually is more of a recategorization, that if all of this isn't mentioned in the staff report, I think, if there's any way to add an addendum or add one more document that explains some of these things, so that when people look at those numbers on their own in the tables, I think, I don't want to use the word misleading, but I think there's just a lot more to, that goes into understanding what people are looking at there. And then, I don't know if this is the bike cages, but on the map, the colorful map with the circles, maybe you mentioned this in the presentation, I didn't notice it, but one of the colors is orange, and if you could pull up that map, it's kind of off. It almost looks like a mistake or a glitch that it just says, its label just says circle. So, and it's a circle. So, I mean, I think that's pretty obvious. It's a circle, but I wonder if somebody was trying to type in a label for a particular type of bike rack, and, oh, I guess it's the circle bike rack. Is there a reason why that's, okay, maybe that's the circle bike rack, is that correct? And if so, is there a reason why it's at the bottom of the legend and not up with all the other circles? Thanks.
Any other online questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, bring it back to the commission for any final comments. Again, this is an information item, so no actions necessary.
Sure, I'll make some. When I was reading the agenda, I thought about my bike commuting experience on Solano, and I realized in many places, I actually use posts. There's lots of signposts everywhere, and for those of us who were bike commuting before, there's a lot of emphasis on bike racks. You just use those. So the one in Flowerland has two, for example. So I'm always parking my bike against a post at Flowerland, Solano Florist. You know, I chain it to the guard railing at Andronico's up at the top of the street. So there's a lot of informal, bike parking, and I don't know how you account for that or not, but I just wanted to mention that. I think most of my other points have been covered by other questions. Just one suggestion. There is one place where I always use the strollers and rollers bike rack. It's when we would start to do Blue Glove Crew right there under the BART tracks at Robbie's art studio. And you can tell how much those bike racks are used by how chipped up the paint is. So it's a really good indicator. Ken's disagreeing?
I have a little history I could share.
Sure. Well, that's up to the chair, but okay with me. And I just say they're powder coated as far as I can tell, and it does wear off.
They are. Robbie chose a non-powder coated rack and had an artist decorate it, and then failed to seal it. We've been trying to negotiate with him to get that reworked. So it does get used a lot, but the nature of the paint is not due to the usage.
Well, then, okay, but just following up on that, do you think you can judge how much the bike racks have been used by the state of the paint?
The short answer is no. It turns out that the formulation of the different color powder coatings wear differently. Let's just take a moment to thank Amy Smolens for spearheading the Albany Strollers and Rollers program to work with businesses in the city to implement the 76 plus bike racks around the city. Usually, Strollers and Rollers splits the cost of the rack with the neighboring business, and the city does the installation. Thank you. And it's been pretty successful. So that's cool.
Oh, just one more point regarding Brian's photos of multiple bikes on a rack. I think that does work if you're with a group of people, like a family, and you can chain all your bikes together. But generally, if you're just one person approaching that rack, you don't just stick your bike in the midst of a bunch of other bikes, because it's going to get really banged up as people come back and your bike's in their way and they try to get your bike out of the way. So I think what you did, no more than 2 bikes per rack is very reasonable.
Oh, I was just going to ask a question about the bike racks. Are all of the bike racks ones that Albany Strollers and Rollers have put in? All of the ones that were on that thing?
Citywide, I don't believe there are any bike racks that were not planned and installed by Strollers and Rollers.
That just brings up a follow-up thought. Perhaps like a future survey could include the history or the implementation of that bike rack to see like if it was provided by Strollers and Rollers or if it was part of another capital project or a maintenance project, whatever it may be. See if there are more successful times that the bike racks are installed.
Very good. Other comments?
I guess my only comment has to do with my assumption, which can be confirmed probably tonight, that when the city installs bike racks, they assure that access for people with different mobility, wheelchair users, et cetera, is not impaired by the placement of the bike racks. Whereas locking your bike, and I don't mean to infer that Michael's making bad choices, but locking your bike to a signpost could block access for a wheelchair user. So there is a saturation point, I would assume, for bike racks along all of our walkways. And that saturation point has to do with the navigability for pedestrians using the bike paths. So bicyclists are using our sidewalks. They're usually riding up to the bike rack by using the ramp that's intended for strollers and people with different mobility. And it's an issue. So bike racks on the street are great, and the numbers of them are useful. But I think we need to be mindful of all users when we talk about that stuff.
Any more comments down at the end? Please, Ken.
I have more, I'm sorry. Hey, Judy, good points, and the dangers of informal bike parking are several, including especially ramps, blocking ADA ramps like at the post office or elsewhere. My family had a bike stolen that was parked at a street sign, and it turns out that the sign wasn't attached. So the bike disappeared. There was a comment about effectiveness of installations. That sounds like a future issue. I think from someone who's been a little bit involved with installation of bike racks, the Strollers and Rollers would be more interested in spending time on maintaining what's there, focusing on making sure that construction projects don't make bike racks disappear, which can happen. I've found that the bike racks tend to get more ganged up parking in the evening when groups arrive to go to dinner. And the letter that was sent in had some pictures of a bike rack where obviously the first 2 bikes had parked next to the bike rack, and then 2 other bikes came in on the end. So it is possible to add on after the first 2 bikes are parked. That's not always possible given the placement of the bike racks. You might be off into the street, which is not cool, of course. I noticed that the exterior racks at Verana Hill, the project, are not represented by a dot. That's a new thing. I've parked in front of their location. They also have bike rooms, not covered by this. And yes, I look forward to talking about that too. But also, I think I, for one, would like to see a distinction between publicly accessible and semi-publicly accessible. I don't know how you would put that. But for example, on the map, the middle school, it has a couple of large dots. And looks like a great place to go and park your bike. But from my experience, there are no public parking spaces on city land, only on school land. There are teacher and visitor spaces just inside the front gate of the main school campus. People have been asked not to park there all day if they're dropping off their kids in the morning, picking them up in the evening, like they're walking to BART or something. That's been an issue. So you could head to this area and expect to be able to park there, but not actually have bike rack accessible in a closed campus. There's one bike rack accessible during the day across the street at the annex. It's not very visible. So, and truly the school campuses are closed during the day for a reason. And often they're open at night, but I don't think we should classify them the same. So at a campus like Marin, there are parking spaces around the perimeter. They have bike boxes that I think still don't have locks on them that are on the perimeter. I would classify all of those as publicly accessible and then have a separate category for the bike parking that's on campus. And I think that will come in handy as we go forward. Thank you.
All right. I will share a couple quick comments. I think that in terms of estimating the number of bike spaces, I don't mind underestimating. If a bike rack can hold 4, but we say, we're assuming 2, that's okay. I'd rather underestimate our capacity than overestimate. For the wish list of future stuff to look at, counting the occupancy would be great to have. If we go kind of by the paradigm of car parking spaces, 85% occupancy is functionally full. It's hard to find a space. At 65% or less, it's pretty good. In a count like that, as has been pointed out, people aren't always parking their bikes on the bike rack, but on other objects. So you'd kind of want to do a count of how many bikes attached to bike racks and how many bikes attached to other stuff. And I wouldn't make any effort to count how many trees, signposts, whatever there are. That's not the point. It's a question of the saturation of bikes. And if we find ourselves coming up with the number of bikes more than the number of bike parking spaces, that's where we say, yeah, we don't have enough. Maybe we want to add some. Where there's high density, I presume at some point in the future, we'd be looking at more on-street bike corrals as a way to not clutter up the sidewalk. But this is, great starting information. And I think there's always more that we could wish for. But again, in the context of what we're going to do with it, I think this is definitely helpful. And we can look spot by spot for those occupancies when there is an opportunity to install. So it's not just arbitrary numbers, but hey, we got opportunity to put in 40 bike racks. Where do we want to put them? So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Follow up?
Yes.
There's another instance where the public versus private comes into play, and that would be under the freeway in the commute lot, which I don't think we can call publicly accessible at this time. It's great to know they're there, but it's not an accessible facility.
Just to make a clarifying point, we distinguished between publicly accessible and publicly inaccessible racks, not public versus private racks. So any rack that we didn't show you the data, but any rack that you couldn't physically get to from the outside of a gate or what have you was publicly inaccessible.
Thank you. All right, our next item 4 is the consent calendar. We have one item, 4-1, which is Transportation Commission meeting minutes from February 27th. Do we have any questions or comments on that, or a motion to approve?
I'll move we approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Thank you. Please poll the commission.
Commissioner Baldwin.
Aye.
Commissioner Barnes.
Aye.
Commissioner Kerr.
Aye.
Commissioner Hiley.
Aye.
Commissioner McCroskey.
Yes.
Commissioner Zuba.
Aye.
Chair Chavandal.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. So next is item 5-1, Sidewalk Repair Program, Phase 10. We have a staff presentation.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is James Sorelli. I'm an associate engineer with the Public Works Department. I'm here to talk tonight about the Sidewalk Program and kind of the status as of 2025. So since there are a few new commissioners here, I figured it would be prudent to take a step back rather than kind of dive straight into normal business with the next phase, to just give an overview of the program, talk a little bit about the repair portion of the program and its history, and specifically how we've approached repair scopes since 2022 when we finished a sidewalk survey. Talk a little bit about street tree preservation and how we work around street trees when we do sidewalk repairs, and then just give a general how many locations we've done update before diving into the Phase 10 scope. So as I mentioned, we'll start with just a general overview of the sidewalk program. But before I get into that, I do want to make it very clear that California law and Albany Municipal Code places sidewalk repair and maintenance on the adjacent property owner. The presence of the city sidewalk program doesn't change legislation in that manner, doesn't change who is ultimately responsible for the condition of the sidewalk in front of their property. The sidewalk program, we talk about the sidewalk repair program, but the program itself actually consists of three major elements: the repair program, sidewalk shaving, and sidewalk survey. And as of right now, the program's fully funded by Measure C, which passed in the last election cycle. It's in place for about 10 years, and it's set to sunset in 2035. Previously, when we were using Measure P1 funds, only the repair program portion was covered by parcel tax. The shaving and sidewalk survey was actually funded either by operating budget in the Public Works Department or grant funding. So the repair program is pretty straightforward. I'm sure you all are aware. It's the annual repair where we take out concrete in poor condition and pour back fresh new concrete. Sidewalk shaving is where you may have also seen this around the city, since it's pretty much touched every sidewalk block in Albany. It's where we're shaving down sidewalk offsets, generally less than 2 inches, to kind of make it more accessible without having to do a full blowout of the sidewalk, break out, put new concrete. And we divided the city into 5 zones. So one zone is shaved every year. And as of next month, all 5 zones within the city will have been shaved since we started in 2021. And the third element is the sidewalk survey. This is a comprehensive survey we do roughly every 5 years. And although we call it a sidewalk survey, it does include our Class 1 paths, like Albany Greenway and the Buchanan Bikeway. We use the data out of it to scope, where to do our repairs, where to do our shaving, and to just get a good sense on what kind of conditions we're dealing with around the city. We're currently scheduled to do the next survey this summer. So even though the sidewalk program has 3 elements, I'm going to focus on the repair program tonight. But I'm, at the end of this presentation, you're more than welcome to ask questions on the other 2 elements. So I'll start with a history. A lot has happened since 2016 with Measure P1 passing. 2016 it passed, and we needed a prioritization criteria on how to choose sidewalks to repair. So originally we were using a more complaint-driven database. We had a list of sidewalk issues reported by the public, as well as just general issues that staff had internally noted. So we went to the commission for approval for the first prioritization criteria, where we essentially used the active transportation plan's priority sidewalk network, and any kind of severe or moderate issues on that network were prioritized in Phase 1, 2, and 3. As sidewalk repair was going on in 2020, the commission approved a modified criteria. This modified criteria opened severe issues citywide, regardless of whether or not it was on the priority sidewalk network, as well as some priority still to moderate issues that still existed on that priority network. And that was Phase 4's the construction done in Phase 4. And kind of at the same time that was happening is when we had Beneficial Designs, a contractor, to come do a comprehensive citywide survey. They're specialists in ADA accessibility, and they kind of used public right-of-way accessibility guidelines published by the U.S. Access Board to kind of, how they measured the issues in the right-of-way. And with that data, we moved from a complaint-driven database to a data-driven approach. Using that, and I'll get into it a bit more shortly, but using that, we had an approved criteria at the commission where what we called critical repairs. Phase 5 handled those while we still kind of got into the weeds with the data, refined the list, and kind of got the final full list of critical repairs that we completed in Phase 6, 7, and 8. By 2023, we finished that plan, so we moved to an updated prioritization criteria, still using that data from the survey. That is the current approach for Phase 9, 10, and 11, or 2024 through 2026 repair plan. Phase 9 was completed last year, and council also revised the sidewalk repair policy. The major element in the policy update was that the parcel tax funding can also be applied towards repairs on Class 1 trails, not just sidewalks. So that includes repairs along the Greenway and the Buchanan Bikeway and elsewhere. And at the end of last year also is when Measure C passed, fully funding the sidewalk program. And then we fast forward to today. So I want to talk just very briefly about repair scoping. This is kind of when we went from the data-driven approach onward in 2022. We used that data that was collected by our contractor Beneficial Designs to build a comprehensive citywide geographical information systems database. It's basically a map where we have all the issues that they identified. We have quantitative data assigned to each of those issues, as well as photos. And there's a lot of data in there. I'm going to kind of focus on the 5 features here. If you are interested more about the survey data, it was talked a bit more in detail at the January 2022 commission meeting. But to be honest, talking about the data could take a whole presentation in itself. So with that, the 5 features that are important to know are no best path to travel. This is kind of where there's multiple issues at a single discrete location. Non-planar pedestrian access route. This is your common upheaval from tree roots. It doesn't necessarily mean the panels are moving away from each other that causes that tripping hazard, but the slope of this upheaval can become a major impediment to seniors, can become impassable depending on how steep it is for people with disabilities, and to some degree it still is a tripping hazard. Then there's vertical and linear discontinuities. These are your typical raised offsets, when you're seeing breaks at panel joints where they're at 2 different heights. The difference being vertical is defined as a joint offset that is perpendicular to how you're walking, and then linear is parallel. From a layman, it's not really an important detail, but it's for how they've surveyed it. It's just how they decided to differentiate between the 2. And then lastly is horizontal openings. These are essentially holes in the sidewalk, where if you're using cane detection, a cane can get caught, or if you're in a wheelchair, your caster can get caught, or if they're really large, a wheel can get caught. So I'm going to just kind of also briefly go through how we scoped the phases 5 through 8, our 2022 through 2023 plan. This started with some of the worst issues identified by Beneficial Designs. We internally call them critical repairs, just as a nomenclature designation we wanted to use. These are major sidewalk issues, severe damage, very poor accessibility conditions. And for ease of planning and construction, we divided all the critical repairs into 4 phases. It was considered critical if it was a no best path of travel feature that had at least 1 greater than or equal to 2-inch vertical discontinuity, or a critical non-planar pedestrian access route if there was a 2-inch offset from the curb and a greater than 8.33% grade. The reason we use that grade is that it's essentially the maximum allowable grade on a curb ramp or a ramp defined by ADA and PROAG. PROAG being the public right-of-way accessibility guidelines. So we just thought that that's a pretty good number to use to start as our worst kind of case condition. So as I mentioned, broke it up into 4 phases. Phase 5 was a citywide kind of repair. Sorry, I'm recovering from a cold. And we used the sidewalks shaving zones to kind of break up the phases into manageable sizes of kind of equivalent, amount of locations. And just went counterclockwise, starting phase 6 in the west and southwest part of town, zones 1 and 5. So I'm just going to briefly talk through the 2024-2026 plan. This was discussed at the last commission meeting when we brought phase 9 in 2024. We used those 5 survey features that I talked about briefly before. Well, one of the issues we were having was that the no best path of travel feature, it has some limited quantitative attribute data outside of its critical distinction, where they noted there was a 2-inch higher vertical offset. So even though it says there's these 3 issues, for example, one of them being a linear offset, we don't actually know how bad it was unless they noted it in the comments. This is something we've adjusted for the next survey, so we'll have a better quantitative data, but it did make it a little trickier for this scope. So we essentially we continued to do the no best path of travel if it was classified as unstable, or in those comments there was some kind of high severity noted that was different than the 2-inch that we QC'd in the field to confirm. Then we used the no par greater than 5% grade. 5% is the maximum allowable for sidewalks outside of ramps and curb ramps, so again, a pretty good cutoff. And just for technical clarification, these weren't recorded if the natural topography is greater than these grades, because obviously there's no ability for us to change the grade of a natural hill. And so when the survey was collected, if you're, some of the locations along Albany Hill, it was a 10% grade in the street naturally. They weren't captured as a no par, only if it was an actual upheaval site. We use 2-inch offsets for vertical and linear discontinuity, and that's essentially because if you have a good 4-inch slab of concrete, about 2 inches is the limit you can shave it. Anything greater than 2 inches, there's no way you can get around repairing it without a full breakout. That being said, it doesn't mean everything up to 2 inches is shavable, but this is really kind of the maximum limit. And then similarly, we just use that 2-inch for horizontal openings as well. We're taking a phased approach, a 3-year timeline. Phase 9 we did last year. It was the northeast east side of town. Phase 10, which we'll talk about more tonight, is the northwest west side of town. And then phase 11 is planned for next year, everything south of Marin Avenue. And that'll be kind of the conclusion of the current plan, where we'll come back for a new prioritization criteria review and approval, and we'll be using that new data that will be collected this year. So, as an Albany resident, you're probably well aware that street trees are the common cause for sidewalk issues around town. So it should come as no surprise that since phase 5, 82% of the repairs we have done have been around a street tree. And sometimes at a discrete location, there's even 2 street trees. So despite that, at the 177 locations that have street trees, we really only had to proactively remove 5 trees in total at 4 locations. There was 1 location that did require 2 street tree removals. But generally, we work around street trees and we try our best to preserve them. And just for full transparency, there were some street trees removed ahead of the planning and design that were initiated by homeowners. This is only really counting the street trees that we, during our design process, identify a tree that's an issue and needs to be removed. We have repaired locations where a homeowner successfully applied. To my knowledge, it's somewhere around 10. But ones that we've had to proactively remove because of our design and construction is these 5 that are noted here. So what does this preservation methodology look like? During planning design, it's really just about giving the roots space or the trunk space for some trees. So we look at, can we curve around the roots? Can we ramp over the roots? And if so, we just proceed with design and construction as planned. If we think the tree will need some kind of impact, we talk to the city forester. He goes out and gives the tree a review based on kind of where we think the sidewalk limits will be. And typically, he thinks we can work with the roots, prune them, shave them. He approves it for, to finish design. And if he thinks realistically, because of the tree health and the amount of impact that will need to happen under construction, that is when we go through that formal removal process through the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Commission. So during construction is the big deal, because that's when we can actually see the roots. There's only so much you can observe when there's still a sidewalk on top. So our approach first is, for these larger roots, can we preserve them in place by shaving them? That's kind of taking off a top layer. So we maintain at least, somewhere around 60% of the root mass or 2/3 diameter. And if we can't, we'll just prune it. And typically, if it's a minor amount of shaving or pruning, the forester's okay with it. No tree issue. We go ahead, we do the work. We review our grading, pour back concrete. We typically, for these situations, would put a wire mesh into the concrete as well. And these are noted, and the forester keeps an eye on the trees just to observe health. In the rare situation that there's just a massive root mass that we were not expecting, the forester will review and we'll kind of get a recommendation from him. But we've never had to have an emergency removal during construction for a street tree where he's noted that this is gonna destabilize it and it needs to come out. We're typically it seems like we're proactive there. If that's gonna be the case, we've identified it ahead of time. Some general things is, some species are just generally difficult to work with because they're trunks. If you're familiar with like the bulbous trees around Albany, the camphors, they just take up a lot of room. So it's tricky to work around them. And then some species, when we do prune them, they do a great job. Myrtles in particular, they take pruning very well. We haven't really seen any major health issues after pruning. But then we have other trees like liquid ambers, which are very common around Albany. They're prone when they're stressed to have sudden limb drop. And we've seen this outside the sidewalk program during health issues. So, every tree is unique. So some quick examples I just wanted to kind of point out. So that top left one, this is what I'm talking about, those camphors where they just kind of bulb out. And we just have to work with what's existing. One that we're particularly proud of is the second from the right at the top. These were identified by the forester as very sensitive trees. They were pretty rare in Albany. I'm not sure of the species, so we actually had to completely realign the sidewalk so we didn't really touch the roots. And we also raised the sidewalk grade. It's actually hard to tell, but that sidewalk is several inches higher than the curb now. And that was really the only way to get around without impacting impacting the trees. And then we talk about ramping. It's actually very difficult to do because you need a lot of space. So the bottom right is one of the rare examples of where we were going to ramp over the roots. It required somewhere around 40 feet of length to make sure grades were compliant and to get a level landing on top. And if you know Albany, these lot sizes are typically 40 feet wide. So if there's a driveway there, we have an inability to do a ramp because we need to conform to the driveway. It would be too steep of a ramp to get over the roots. So it's very rare, but again, we do try our best, and this was one of those very rare situations where we were able to go ahead with the ramping strategy. So just a quick update on just how many repairs we've done, how it's looking. Since we've kind of done the data-driven approach in Phase 5, we did 216 locations. And overall, since Phase 1 was started, 2017, 2018, we've done a total of 444 locations around the city. That's just under 67,000 square feet, which is just a number. So if you assume a 5-foot sidewalk width, that's about 13,000 feet, which is the length of 44 football fields. Or if you decided one day to go on a casual walk on San Pablo from Central Avenue all the way to University Avenue, it's about the length of sidewalk we've replaced. And you know, we've really done a large swath of the city, and we're going to continue to do it. It does look like right now the northeast side's a little overrepresented, and that's because we had done phase 9, but phase 10 and phase 11 will be the rest of the city, and there really isn't a street that we haven't touched almost at this point. But there's always work to do. And kind of with that overview and update to kind of get to the meat of why I'm here tonight is phase 10. You know, these were repair locations that were identified per that 2024-2026 plan I talked about. And it also includes 2 special access need issue complaints that we received for a total of 40 locations. And some of those locations, there's 2 at a given address. So that's why on a map, you know, when you review these on a map, it might say that there's 40 locations, but you're doing a really good job at counting all those properties, and you only see something like 38. That's why. I'll go to the map of what it looks like, but I just wanted to point out the 2 San Pablo locations. These actually are under evaluation right now by Caltrans to repair within the next couple of months. If they deem it by the powers be that they'll repair it. If not, they are identified under the criteria, so we will get to it later this fall if Caltrans has not repaired them. Here's just kind of a map of where those locations will be. One that's not shown here is 527 Santa Fe. This is one that, based on the data, didn't meet the criteria for phase 9. We received a complaint and had surveyed it, went out and checked it, and it looks like it had worsened to the condition where it should have realistically been captured. So out of due diligence, we're going to include it in this repair phase, since had we known the conditions at the time, it would have been part of phase 9. We're looking to go to the next council meeting for authorization to bid, and that'll put us on schedule by July to get a contractor awarded, start construction by September, and wrap it up by no later than Thanksgiving. So with that, staff are recommending that the Transportation Commission recommend that council authorize the Phase 10 project for construction of additional sidewalk improvements at the proposed locations. And I will open up to questions.
Thank you. Any questions from commissioners?
Yeah, I have a few.
Michael?
I have noticed in places that the new sidewalks are already cracking, and I raised that with our Public Works Director, and he went and investigated, and he said, those are actually not our repairs, those were the homeowners' repairs. So is there, you know, any outreach to homeowners about the quality of the repairs or recommendations, or how good they should be? Is the city willing to completely take over the process to guarantee that quality is good?
Well, it depends on the kind of cracking. Cracking is not abnormal for concrete. There's all types of cracking. It depends if the cracking gets to an issue where it's an accessibility concern. And at that point, by law, they're required to fix it, and we would notify them that it requires remediation. But essentially, cracking in and of itself is not necessarily a problem.
Okay. The west side of town is newer than the east side, so does that mean there's fewer problems with sidewalks in this new phase?
Not necessarily. It really just, it more so depends on the street tree cover. Typically areas, and the planter strip widths. Areas that typically have narrow planter strip widths and a lot of street tree cover, they're the ones we see the issues. And I don't actually know off the top of my head, you know, what part of town has that high percentage. I do know that the southeast part of town has a particularly narrow right-of-way, so that's why it may look overrepresented, just because it doesn't have a lot of room for street trees and problems cause faster. That's anecdotal, so I wouldn't quote me on that, but it would require more of a look at planter strip widths and street trees coverage.
Okay. Last question. Camphors, there are a lot of them in my neighborhood, and I've been in my house now, God forbid, 25 years. And they were beautiful trees 25 years ago, but a lot of them are obviously near death, as you know, an amateur observer, I would say. So, for example, you showed us that one bit of beautiful concrete work where you went around the camphor tree and up and back down. That's probably at about 1,000 Oaks and Santa Fe, somewhere around there. So how do you, my thought when I first saw that was, wow, that's a lot of work, because that tree will probably have to be removed in 5 years. So how do you deal with these older dying trees that are still there? Is that a decision you make with our urban forester, or just, I'm curious, because there's lots and lots of camphors in my neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down, what the forester looks at is the health of the tree. So if it is old and dying, we won't, he's going to probably recommend it for removal. But this also speaks to somewhat a larger picture, the street tree management plan on how we're going to handle an urban canopy that's essentially reached its service life, its end of life. And, we do this work, but it doesn't necessarily mean that when that tree is removed and we grind out the stump, because we do grind the stump, that a new tree can't be planted there and take advantage of that nice wide planter strip.
Yeah, I'll just make the point, we have this complicated interaction between our streetlight plan, our street tree plan, and our sidewalk plan, and it's always kind of juggling, these items around. That's it.
Any other questions?
Just a quick question. Thank you. I mean, I can think back before the sidewalk rehab program was in place, and the process of complaining to Public Works and then having somebody come out was pretty onerous. But it still exists that within the 10 phases or 11 phases that you're going to be doing, there will be need for urgent repairs. And you made reference to that briefly, but how does that fit into the prioritizing? So if you're on the east side of town or the west side of town with your repairs, does the truck get dispatched to an urgent repair site, or how does that work?
I mean, it depends on the definition of urgent. I would say one example we had on Pomona a couple of years ago during that storm, we had a tree that fell and basically knocked the sidewalk out. That's outside the sidewalk repair program kind of criteria. That is a sidewalk that needed repair. It was essentially destroyed. So in terms of an emergency, that's kind of outside this scope. This is more for general rehabilitation. If there is an emergency like that arises, we're going to go out and repair it as soon as possible.
And would the same contractor be involved, and it would be just a reallocation of their time to that site?
So that one would, because we go through this bidding process and there's kind of a very set time frame for the contractor to do these repairs, that kind of situation would be more likely we have maybe an on-call contractor or issue a PO, because we just need to get out there, and we don't want to wait 6 months, up to even 12 months.
That's my question. Yeah. So thank you.
Other questions?
I'm curious now, James, you say that the city goes out and repairs emergency sidewalk breaks?
No, sorry. We'll issue a PO or have an on-call contractor go out there.
You don't require the property owner to repair?
In those situations, it's just kind of, when it rises to an emergency like that, like again, this tree knocked out an entire sidewalk, it's a major hazard that we want to make sure it's repaired as quickly as possible. That doesn't encourage homeowners to go wild on their sidewalks, and we'll come fix them, because we'll find you. And
Right. Any questions online?
Oh, sorry, I have one question. I can't remember now from the timeline, but I know that you said that there was a change that allows this funding to be used on the Greenway and other non-sidewalks. Are those areas included in this prioritization, or are those going to be initially or newly included in the next phase?
So at this time, it's just traditional sidewalks. We are trying, this funding's very new.
Yeah.
So we're trying to kind of more programmatically figure out how to apply it to our Class 1 trails, because things like Albany Greenway and Buchanan Bikeway, it's not so much, they have, because they're asphalt, they need certain treatments akin to a street, like a slurry seal and things like that. And generally, as asphalt, there's just different things we need to look at. So we're still kind of working that out, whether, you know, this program's more for like, there's sudden rutting in the trail, we do a patch, or do we do like those larger scale kind of improvements? We're still kind of vetting that, and, you know, at this time, we don't really have a very refined idea on how we're going to do it. This will be part of the capital improvement plan process, and we'll kind of get a better hold on that. Because again, as I mentioned earlier, this parcel tax funding was originally just for sidewalks, so there's a lot of new elements in here we're kind of juggling and seeing how, and the CIP process is going to kind of shake it all out.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Any online?
Looks like we have one online. Brian Martin, please speak.
Yeah, thanks, Brian Martin. Thanks for this work. I helped pass P1 and C, and it's great to see the network for pedestrians maintained in a way that's similar to streets for cars. I'm on the Parks Commission, speaking as a private citizen, but these tree removal applications do come before us. I think it's important for the public to hear what you reported, that many more trees are saved than are removed. On my commission, we get just the removals. We don't get to cheer over the trees that were saved. Those don't come before us. So we just it's good to hear how much the city works to try to preserve trees and how many have been compared to how many were applied to be removed. I do want to hear how sidewalks in my neighborhood on Albany Hill can be addressed, not for cracks, you know, so much, but for the things I emailed about, the basic features like curb ramps, gaps in sidewalks across parcels, and sidewalk width. Measure C broadens the scope of sidewalk improvements. I know in the current phase that's funded by P1, as you presented it, none of these issues are addressed. What can be done in this program for these fundamental issues with sidewalks in this part of town? Thanks.
Okay. I believe that was the only online comment. Very good. Back to the commission for any further comments.
Well, I just want to say, I think the sidewalk repair program is going really well, and I think it's been such a success, correct me if I'm wrong, that the city of Berkeley has been looking into something based on what we do. Yes?
I'm unsure, I haven't heard that.
Okay.
I'd be interested to hear how we differentiate between the issues that the caller brought up and general repair issues.
So this program is envisioned as just general rehabilitation of existing sidewalk, specifically in regards to sidewalk widening, like, you know, which would require changes, modifications to the curb line. That requires a lot more design. We need to look at roadway widths, and specifically in Albany Hill, that's actually a wildfire, you know, evacuation zone. We got to make sure there's enough emergency widths, and if we're narrowing them, that needs consensus from the neighborhood, because we would essentially be having to remove parking because how narrow those streets already are. And some of them are red curb, but some of them are, you know, do allow us, like for Hillside, for example, there are portions that allow for parking on both sides. If we were to widen the sidewalk, it would likely require red curbing. So it's not something we wouldn't do without going through more of a capital improvement process and getting input from the public. But generally speaking, these kind of things, there's a lot more considerations than this small program can handle, a lot more funding requirements, a lot more design. And that would be better handled through the capital improvement plan, you know, brought up through that, or even potentially the active transportation plan, public outreach. These are the funding may technically say it's for widening of sidewalks, but this kind of scope is significantly larger than just kind of pouring a little, bit more sidewalk at the back of walk. This is specifically on Albany Hill. You're talking about extending pushing the curb line further out. And similarly, curb ramps. There are some curb ramps that they're typically installed during capital improvement projects, paving most commonly. But we are looking with the current CIP to propose potential curb ramp specific projects. I personally recommend, from a professional recommendation, it is best done during paving because you're regrading, you have the potential to regrade the street, which gives a lot more flexibility with the curb ramps and also the crosswalk grades. But that being said, it is important to get these curb ramps in, and the CIP kind of, again, shakes that out, and, whether it's in a paving project or whether we have like a discrete curb ramp only project.
I have a question. When you're doing the repairs, are you noting the likely cause of the issues? Like, I know we talked mostly about trees today. Is it predominantly trees? Or what made me think of it is when the caller had mentioned in his letter that, there's some streets where people are parking their cars on the sidewalk. And so I'm wondering how does that impact the wear and tear of the sidewalks? And, if you're keeping track of the likely cause of the wear and tear.
We don't keep a track of cause. I can confidently say 4 out of 5 times it is the tree. Mm-hmm. Technically, parking your car on the sidewalk is illegal, and it does have deterioration issues because these sidewalks are not designed for that kind of loading. The driveways are designed differently than traditional sidewalks, so consistent parking on a sidewalk is likely to damage it. And this is also why you see a lot of cracking on sidewalks, specifically when it crosses the driveway approach, because you're getting constant loading over time. For some of these, is loading over a century of very heavy vehicles.
Other questions, comments? Michael?
Quickly, I have heard that it's not a good idea to put rebar in sidewalks because it makes it difficult to find metal objects underneath the sidewalk like pipes. Do you have an opinion about that?
Not particularly. I'm not as familiar with it, the technology. It really depends what technology you're using to do utility identification. I can't really speak to it, but typically rebar under sidewalks is only on driveways anyway, so at that point, if it's a utility running, you're going to find it adjacent. And most major utilities are in the street in Albany, with the exception of some of our more undergrounded corridors like Lower Marine Avenue and Masonic Avenue. So in Albany, most of these major utilities are impacted if you do street excavation, not so much if you do sidewalk excavation. And if you're doing sidewalk excavation, the common one is a lateral, which is very identifiable from either the meter box or a service from the back of sidewalk.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Oh, wait, I have one more question, or comment, I guess. As you're going through this process, are you having a formal communication with the planning and zoning and possibly Parks and Rec to have conversations around, the issues that you're seeing so that perhaps guidelines that can be changed to prevent these certain problem trees, maybe a different tree would be planted, or if there's clear issues with certain sidewalk structures that maybe that could be changed in planning and zoning?
In terms of the street trees, we used to have a very large list of allowable trees, and it is significantly smaller because of that reason. So we have essentially changed the allowable trees that are in the right-of-way. But if you talk to any forester, they would not say most of the planter strips in Albany should have trees in them because they're going to cause uplift. But they're just too narrow. You need significantly more. Washington, those kind of wide planter strips are kind of in our best practice are considered the bare minimum for your widths, not most of Albany streets. So this is an issue that's going to continue to arise. There's really no getting around it. As long as we want street trees and safe sidewalks, it's something we're going to have to deal with.
Thank you.
I would like to see this issue of missing or inaccessible sidewalks addressed at some point. And if the ATP is the place to do that, then we need to refer the comments to the ATP process.
Very good.
I read Mr. Martin's letter, and I've experienced similar issues in other areas on the hillside. It's somewhat pervasive, and it's hard to be hiking uphill, huffing and puffing, and have to avoid ramming yourself into a telephone pole. And there are other issues as well.
Any other comments or questions before we?
A follow-up question to Ken's point: did the beneficial designs survey include that kind of analysis, or is there a plan to have that kind of survey done for the ATP?
That's in there. They essentially, like I said, there's a swath of data in there that I didn't talk about tonight. But yeah, we've identified essentially where sidewalks end with, they call them, I think, no pedestrian access routes, which is very easy to mix up with non-planar pedestrian access routes, but something along those lines where they say, there's a sidewalk and then there's nothing. They've identified locations that have lack of width. We actually have, in addition to all the, point data of deficiencies, we actually have stations data is what we call it, whereas basically they have measured the sidewalk width and grades consistently and across all our sidewalks. So we know from the database at any given spot, this is how wide the sidewalk is, and this is what the grade of that sidewalk is for an approximate 10-foot stretch, assumed. So yes, long story short, yes, we do have that data right now.
I refer to those no sidewalk zones as Shell-Silverstein zones.
Very good. Okay, that's hopefully some good information for future follow-up, but we do have a recommendation we're being asked to make, that the commission recommend the council authorize the sidewalk rehabilitation Phase 10 project for construction of additional sidewalk improvements at the proposed locations. Would anyone care to make that motion?
So moved.
Commissioner Barnes?
Can I add to that?
Amendment?
The spoken recommendation by staff plus the referral of the issue of missing and blocked sidewalks to the ATP planning process.
Okay. Is that acceptable, Commissioner Barnes?
That's acceptable, sure.
Okay, do we have a second with that amendment?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please poll the commission.
Commissioner Baldwin,
Aye.
Commissioner Barnes,
Aye.
Commissioner Kerr,
Yes.
Commissioner Hiley,
Yes.
Commissioner Markowski,
Yes.
Commissioner Zupa,
Aye.
and Chair Javendel.
Aye. Thank you. On to item 5.2, which is our expenditures of sugar-sweetened beverage tax.
Give me a minute to pull this up. Great, thank you, Chair. So this is an annual item. In 2016, Albany voters approved Measure 01, ordinance number 2016-02, establishing a tax on sugar-sweetened beverages. As included in the ordinance, the tax generates general fund revenue that the City Council aims to apply towards specific purposes related to health and well-being, and approved expenditures are incorporated into the city's annual operating budget. The item is regarding the use of an estimated $220,000 in tax proceeds. And just a note there, we have seen the revenue numbers decline in the last couple of years, so it's a smaller number than prior year. So the process is for the commission to submit a recommendation to the city council, which would then be presented along with recommendations from other entities at an upcoming study session anticipated in May this year. And there is a website on the city, page on the city's website specific to these projects with much of the information I'm presenting tonight and information on the program. So prior program recommendations from the Transportation Commission are provided here. The last couple of years, the commission's included priority items, like a top tier items that are more transportation specific items, and secondary items that are showing support of some of the other programs that the revenue has funded. And I'll go into some more details on these in the coming slides. The prior city council expenditure plan from this last year included funding 5 programs, one new one, some funding towards the Giltrack Community Farm, and again, I'll detail each of these programs. So the school crossing guard program has been provided by the city, retaining the services of all city management services since the 2018-2019 fiscal year, and funded with Sugar-Sweetened Beverage Tax proceeds. And the aim is to provide safe crossings for students going to Albany schools. And as you saw in the numbers, this is a substantial portion of the revenue. Bike safety program has been included also since the 2019-2020 fiscal year, provides intensive education and training courses for bicycling to elementary grade students. The students learn how to perform a bike safety check, adjust helmets, communicate with traffic, and abide by the rules of the road, and safely navigate around their neighborhood school. And Cycles of Change is the nonprofit that the city contracts with to provide this program. Albany Swims is a AUSD program to teach young children to swim, targeting primary grades with a comprehensive program to improve water safety and fitness in children that are most at risk for drowning. The Albany Move and Groove event is a one-day event that provides outdoor exercise and music to promote physical wellness. It's a 5K course around Albany High School and Memorial Park, where participants can walk, run, skate, wheelchair, or stroll while being entertained by live bands stationed around the course. And new for this past fiscal year is funding to support curriculum development and 25 field trips to the UC Giltrack Community Farm. And included in the report is a bit of an update on the bike safety program. So post-COVID-19 changes in school and things going remote, the program has been, since it's been back to in-person, covering one-day drive your bike sessions for 3 to 4 classes at both Ocean View and Marin, and separate funding from Alameda CTC has covered bike rodeos at each of those schools for younger grade. The city worked with Cycles of Change this year to expand service to Cornell Elementary, which had dropped off the program, and so the recommendation and the need to continue to do that in the next fiscal year to provide the training for 5th graders at all 3 elementaries, as well as a 3% increase in the rate from the 15,000, so 7,500 per school times 3, and then 3% on top of that is 23,175 to continue providing that level of service in the coming year. And this would continue to rely on, but I have no indication that there's changes in the Alameda County Transportation Commission Safe Routes program. This would still rely on pairing with their funding to provide the bike rodeos typically this training has been going for the 5th graders, and then 4th graders have been accessing the bike rodeo program. And that will continue to rely on being both funding and scheduling to provide that in addition to this, but they've been a good pair for the last several years. And with that, I'll open it up. We're seeking a recommendation to City Council for the use of the Sugar-Sweetened Beverage Tax proceeds for fiscal year 2026.
Okay, questions from commissioners?
I have a question. Do we have any data or information about like the participation in some of these things, like the Albany Swims and the Move and Groove, or what has been the school feedback on the bike safety program? I mean, I really like all of these, but if this is how we're spending our money, it would be good to know, like what has been the response or interest in these from the community.
Yeah, I didn't pull reports from prior years. All of the recipients are supposed to submit a mid-year or mid-program report by the end of this month, and that gets provided at the council study session. So there is some information, more information than I've provided. I have the information on the Cycles of Change bike safety program because I manage that one, but pulling the information on the other programs, we should have a better sense by the time it goes to the council study session. We could pull those reports from the last council study session for the programs that have been running for several years to get a better sense of that, but I didn't provide that tonight.
Additional questions? Okay, any?
Well, just a follow-up question. This $35,000, what do we know about how well or accurately it was spent, given that it's not a city program? And we're giving money to the school district and maybe to the University of California, I'm not sure, but how do we verify that program?
So we have a contract with, I believe, the fiscal sponsor for the Go Track Community Farm. They should be submitting their mid-year report to go to be part of the package that goes to the city council study session. So that will be the information that we should have by the time that it comes to the city council.
Okay, thank you.
And I just have one question about the crossing guard funding. Going back to the first year of the Sugar-Sweetened Beverage Tax and then going forward from there, do we have any information on when the crossing guard support was added to the funding? What years we did or did not include crossing guards in the Sugar-Sweetened Beverage Tax?
It's been funded since the 2018-2019 school year. I think it's been each year since then.
So every single year of this? Okay.
That's my correct recollection as well.
Okay. If there's no further questions from commissioners, open to the public. Any online? Okay. Seeing none, back to the commission for discussion and recommendations.
So just to follow up on my question about the crossing guards, I have felt fairly strongly since this sugar-sweetened beverage tax was passed, and I was part of the team that put it together, that crossing guards shouldn't be included in what is become a diminishing source of revenue for the city, and that we really need a commitment to the safety of the students from the school district and from the city in a combined way. Using sugar-sweetened beverage tax for this high degree of public safety, to my mind, is sort of a misconception, and that we need a better approach.
Yes, Michael.
Well, following up on that, if I may, let me provide about 60 seconds of background. we kind of followed Berkeley's lead. Berkeley was interested in doing a sugar-sweetened beverage tax. The difference with Berkeley is unique because it has its own public health department, which is unusual for a city its size, but it does. I mean, I had concerns from the start with this, like, how are we going to spend it? How are we going to make sure what we spent it on was health-related, whatnot? Meanwhile, at about that time, the traffic guard program, which had been funded by AUSD, the school district, and the university, went kaput. Basically, the university said, we're short on money, we're not going to fund this program anymore. So I thought at that time that the city could work with AUSD to help fund the traffic guard program. And AUSD said, we're not going to help you fund it. So we got this dumped on our lap. At about that time, the sugar-sweetened beverage tax came through. Now remember, I think San Francisco tried to do this as a specific tax, which means it needs a supermajority requirement if you're going to earmark for a specific purpose. I think they didn't get that, so we did kind of a workaround, is we'd made it a general tax, which means the money goes into the general fund, but we kind of added an extra stipulation that we would have this review process, which is what we're in the middle of now. So I agree with Judy that, you know, some of the ways we are spending the money currently is not really what we told the taxpayers we would be doing. And I have a problem with that. You know, at first we did some drinking fountains in the parks. We did safe routes to schools. I thought that was reasonable. I kind of balked at funding the traffic guards so heavily out of this money. But $35,000 for, when I first heard that they were considering doing this field trip program to the Gill Tract, I'm like, well, the kids can just walk there. What's the deal? So my feeling is, personally, as a member of this commission, I would like to see that $35,000 repurposed, given that right now we have absorbed the cost of the traffic guards program. I don't see why we're funding a program that for Albany School District and the University of California. And I do think, given that we're starting to, you know, deal with the active transportation plan, one, and two, that there's some kind of need, and we just heard about it earlier today, for some kind of planning or process for dealing more with e-bikes and high speeds on our trails, that we could repurpose that money to do something. The motorcycle training in the state of California is quite good. My son, I think, is alive because he had been trained how to dress for a crash, and he had a bad crash. But he had a broken femur, but other than that, he pretty much survived because he was wearing $1,000 worth of protective gear. So I thought, could we somehow scale down a program like the state's motorcycle licensing program for kids on e-bikes? I think the short answer is no, because as a small city, we don't really have the wherewithal to do something like that. But it would be nice if we could do something to address what, you know, I think we're beginning to see a problem. And if we had $30,000 to donate to it, in addition to the kind of stuff the education we already do, I think that would be a great use of this money and something well within the purview of this commission to suggest to the city council. End of soapbox.
Thank you. Other comments?
Can I just pause before we do more comments, if we can check if we have any public comment from the audience? Because
Showed up online?
We raise your hand online if you would like to speak on this item. Okay, not seeing
Right,
it.
thank you. Okay. Other comments?
I don't disagree about where the funds are coming from for crossing guards, and that has been a troubling thing for me for a while. I would love to see crossing guards covered in our regular budget, given all of the surrounding issues we have to move forward. Notwithstanding, last year I spoke out about that and pursued that with my city council contacts, and it was basically a non-starter, I was told. So I'm going to put my energy today in focusing on what this commission is supposed to focus on, and suggest that, well, first of all, I am very familiar with the bike safety program and have helped teach it as a parent volunteer. I would suggest that maybe that's a place, if this commission wanted to review the curriculum, that we might put in some additional curriculum about e-bike and all bike speeds. And it's really about respecting where you are, and yeah, enough said. And changes to the program sound fine. As mentioned by staff, we're getting all fifth graders, or the intent is to get all fifth graders before they leave elementary school. That's great, because most are going a little further to get to the middle school. There are more bike racks, they're older, they're more independent. It's a great time to do that kind of training. It's maybe not perfect, but it's a great time. So I would actually suggest that that we recommend the crossing guard program and the bike safety program alone, and leave that as our recommendation, as related to what we're involved with. Don't think it's our place to necessarily comment as a commission on other programs, other than to just not mention them.
Okay. Any further comments?
You know, while I'm at it, there is, I think, some need for adult cycling education, because when you have cargo bike, e-bikes, they're a different critter than the kind of bikes that many of us grew up with. And I don't, I think Ken's idea of keeping it simple is a good one, but I just wanted to toss that out there.
All right. Commissioner Kirk?
So I have a follow-up question for you, Michael. So are you envisioning requirements, availability of classes? There are some jurisdictions that do a redirection program in terms of giving a warning or a ticket and then requiring people to attend a class. What do you have in mind?
Well, grown-ups are a different kettle of fish, right? For example, correct me if I'm wrong, we do not have helmet laws for adults in California, but we do have for children. So, like it or not, children, and there's a lot of issues about like First Amendment stuff in schools. Children, we can force them to do things we can't force their parents to do. I would like to see some kind of voluntary program, although I gotta say, I got nailed once for running through a stop sign on UC Berkeley campus, which I rolled through for 10 years, and it turned out it just happened to be March 17th, and people thought because it was St. Patrick's Day, maybe I was inebriated, and I was like, what? I've been at work all day. So UC Berkeley has such a program where if you get a ticket on a bike, you have to go take a class, which I could have taught, but never mind. Yeah, that's an option.
But if there was information about cargo and e-bikes that you hadn't ridden, you might not have been able to teach it.
Correct. Yeah, I have never ridden a cargo bike. I'll make that clear. I think we could start with something voluntary for parents, because after all, I see them schlepping around with 2 little kids on the back. You'd think that would give them the incentive.
So only if they're a parent?
Well, if we did it through the schools, that might be a thought.
You want to require the schools to do it. So it gets really complicated.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Unless we have, obviously I'm thinking out loud, And it's up, I'd be curious what other people think. I mean, I don't think we would want to burden APD with such a program. I think
We have an instructional facility within our city, which is the community center. Perhaps we could encourage them to offer classes.
That would be good. I think one thing about the motorcycle training, though, in California is you have to pass a physical test. You have to, they set up cones in a parking lot, and you have to demonstrate you have adequate skills. Kids, I think we do that with the bike rodeo thing for kids, I would assume. Maybe we could sort of encourage parents on e-bikes to do that as well, just so they understand what it's like to maneuver one of those big cargo bikes. Again, I'm thinking out loud, so I'm curious what other people think.
Yes.
Yeah, I will. What I'm confused or unsure about is when you're talking about these programs, it's almost as if like they have to go through the training. Like when you're saying, oh, so that the parents know what it's like to ride the cargo bike, but we're also these are people who are already riding the bikes and are comfortable riding their bikes, and perhaps they need reminders of rules like you did when you went through the stop sign at UC Berkeley or whatever. But I feel like it's I don't really agree that we should be having some sort of like almost disciplinary approach of like you have to do these programs or you have to take a class before you can ride a bike. It feels you're very targeted of specific users and types of cyclists, and I don't feel like that's. I think there's an equity issue there, and I just don't agree with that path. I do think it's an interesting idea to maybe have a program where. Kind of like what they're doing for the fifth graders, but it's just voluntary, and people could have it like through like you were saying, through the community center, and maybe we fund an instructor for that program, and it could be like once a month. There's this, information and practice. You could set up a practice area if people do want to have that opportunity, but I don't think that we should go down that path of like requiring some sort of program before people are allowed to ride bicycles in the city.
Justin, would you put the grid up again, the different categories that I've sort of lost track of everything we've been.
The prior year expenditure?
Yeah, please.
While you're doing that, I would say I agree that we should be talking about the programs that we are sort of in our purvey of for the taxes, and maybe not having opinions as much about the community farm. Let the Parks and Rec group kind of have that conversation. So yeah, like I don't know anything about the Albany Swims program. I even tried to Google it before this, and I couldn't find information online. So I don't feel like that's something I could speak about, recommend one way or another.
And I tend to agree with the idea that we can stay away from recommendations on anything that's not traffic or traffic safety, transportation related, which means we're talking about crossing guards and bike safety programs. I think
You could make an argument about swimming, but we can just let that go.
depends on the rain, yeah.
Well,
We do have the Albany Beach.
regarding swimming, my understanding from way back when I was on the school board, from 2002 to 2006, the pool is not a city facility. The pool is a school district facility, and they have priority, and they do swim instructions as part of PE, or they should be. So it's
So is
kind
that
of
what
up to
this is part of?
No, I don't think
Oh,
so, no.
yeah.
But no, it's many schools, and that's up to the schools, have requirements for swimming. I mean, I think swimming in California is a life skill. You got to know how to swim. But that could be handled within the school district. We don't have to be involved in it. It's their pool. If they want to spend time using their pool for PE classes, it's up to them.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if maybe this was just part of the Albany Aquatic Center swimming program. maybe is totally, do either of you know what it is? Albany Swims.
It is through the school district. My understanding is it's targeting students that might not otherwise have opportunity to be getting lessons or to be.
Subsidizing their fees for the.
Okay. Any commissioners who haven't commented yet?
Yeah, on the crossing guard, I appreciate what you guys, other commissioners have brought up about it perhaps being more appropriately funded separately. But I think without having a clear alternative or it being certain that they are going to get the funding they need from anything else, that we should recommend that as a priority for use of the tax with its current state.
Thank you. Any comments in the end?
Quickly looked up the Albany Swims, and it's really targeted at first, second, and third graders for children who are the most at risk for drowning safety.
Thank you. Okay. Any comments? Okay. I will add, I do agree with the idea of focusing in on the school crossing guards and the bike safety training. I think with respect to the expansion of the bike safety training, training for cargo bikes sounds nice for people who want it, and in absence of a program that's ready to teach it, I don't think we should be recommending funding for it. I do think, however, given our past discussions and recent legislation in Marin County and the experience of the tremendous rise in injuries associated with e-bikes, if we can ask for the bike training program to potentially offer some e-bike safety training, that would be great to have. And I would be willing to significantly increase the funding we recommend for that program. 30,000 instead of 23,000 would seem like a simple round number that's not just, trying to grab all the money, but something that puts a little bit of money to allow for the program to add that training certainly fits our safety goals. Yes.
Yeah, I would say that maybe we would propose then to have a separate bike safety program at like the high school or the middle school, because this is targeting fifth graders and they're not likely users of the e-bikes, and they're still this is a group that's still learning how to ride a bike and the safety stopping at stop signs.
Excellent point.
Maybe if we could propose adding a bike safety program for the high school or for the middle school, it would be more targeted on safe speeds and road rules, things like that.
I think if we want to catch them before they start significantly using e-bikes, middle school may be the sweet spot for that one. I think that's a good suggestion, in which case, do we want to ask for more? And if it's $7,500 per school for the regular bike training, that's great. E-bikes get a little more complicated. Do we throw another $7,500 or do we want to up it a bit?
Do we know if this program has something that is designed for older students and has a focus more on the topics that we're talking about?
So there used to be a middle school component to the program. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, they used to do it on a 2-year cycle, hitting each of they would cover 4th and 5th graders at the 3 elementary schools by being there every other year, and being at the middle school every other year is like the 4th. So they did do, I think, for a time, catch middle schoolers, sort of have 2 touch points with folks over that cycle. I don't know the specifics of whether that's the distinction now that they're making between 5th and 4th, or they had a different level of training at the middle school level. I'm not sure. I'd have to discuss that with them.
Okay.
So I would say in terms of the elementary school Learn to Ride program, these are kids who are very interested in riding electric scooters and electric bikes. And adding in information about what's appropriate and setting expectations at that age is entirely appropriate. Now, when you get into curriculum about riding an electric bicycle, there is a ready-to-go curriculum for Bikey Spay. It could be taught through the community center. So that's not an issue. I've taught that. Obviously, because I'm voting on this, I would be ineligible to teach and earn any money from teaching through our community center. So I'm very clear on that. So I think there's sort of a multiple prong thing here. I think recommending a little extra money for the elementary bike education program is a good idea. Asking to engage with the organization that does it to look at the curriculum, because we might have other questions as well and interests. We've talked here about behavior on paths. It's a good time to hit kids. And then separately, maybe thinking about a quarterly class through the community center. That's not something we have packaged to put on this month. What's our deadline?
I believe the study session will be in May, so you could talk about this next month. We might have a few other meaty topics next month as well. So, but if it was a focused conversation where we could bring you back specific information you were asking for, we should have time for you to revisit it next month before the council study session.
It might even be a consent. Thank you. A consent item. Yes. with updated details that would satisfy me. So that's what I would recommend.
Right. So then one question is, we've got the numbers from last year. I know that the fund is diminishing, but at the same time, the costs for the crossing guard program, et cetera, are likely going up. So if I were thinking in normal budgeting mode, I'd say take the 182 and change and ask for 185, ask for 23 to 25 for the bike safety training, and then throw another 10,000 on top. So just to put some numbers out there as a proposal, 185 for crossing guards, with the broken record message that we've given them in the past, that this should be funded out of city sources other than the Sugar-Sweetened Beverage Tax. 25,000 for the school bike safety training, and 10,000 additional for an e-bike safety training, pending a further consent item before the Transportation Commission in April as to the method of delivery, either through the community center or through middle school.
Is that a motion?
I'm happy to make it a motion.
I'd be happy.
Friendly
Please.
Friendly addition.
Amendment?
We talked about a couple different things. We talked about newer cargo bikes, and we talked about e-bikes.
I'm focusing on e-bikes and e-scooters for that additional piece. The cargo bikes, I think, is a separate thing that, people will want to learn before they get those bikes, and I kind of leave it up to them. If we can point people in the right direction, that's fine, but I don't think spending this money to deliver that when it's not a well-formulated strategy that's tied to a health outcome, it doesn't make it a high priority for us. We can't pursue everything, so I'm going to leave that one out.
Fair enough.
Although many cargo bikes are now e-bikes.
That's true, and getting the basic training is going to go a long way towards accomplishing that. So I want to keep us focused on something that's hopefully achievable. I don't disagree that there would be value, but this is the higher value, in my opinion.
So the other piece of information I have is that Bikey Spay's classes are grant funded and of no cost to the jurisdiction they're offered in. So it's more about the costs of coordinating and supporting that. So we might go 5,000.
Yeah, that may be,
Well,
yeah, let's say,
let's not lowball it at this point, because the council will do that for us.
let's put a placeholder of 10. Let's do the research if we can, please. And it might come back and say, yeah, you only need 5 to get Bike East Bay to deliver this, and I'd be perfectly happy with that. But just as our starting point, if we go with those numbers.
Did you put a frequency of the class?
Be determined.
Okay.
Why again is the cost of the crossing guard program increasing year to year?
It was reduced slightly
Was it?
when, let's see, the site has the numbers, so I can share that with you. Hold on.
And also, how do you think the new development on the Ocean View Elementary School area, how do you think that new construction will affect the price of the crossing guard?
You mean the
Development on that corner?
affordable housing project?
Not sure the name of it, but the one that added the bike block to the front by Ocean View Elementary School, that one, Jackson Street project.
I think I can answer that. That 800 or 786 bed facility was aimed at single graduate students and is not multifamily housing.
Right. How do you think that development, because it increases the safety on that crosswalk, how do you think that would it affect the school crossing guard program and the price of it, or would that just be insignificant?
That's a good question. I think that the answer is you're still going to have a crossing guard to cross Buchanan, and that won't change. So probably the cost, it will not change.
I think you have to assume that most of the people in that building are going to be going to and from the university and not using Buchanan in general.
Even if there's an impact on that intersection, our cost to provide the crossing guard wouldn't change on the basis of that. The need might, but the cost won't.
Did you get a second?
Michael had a second pending.
Yeah, we might want to restate the,
Oh, I was just answering a question that had come up. The crossing guard program costs are shown here.
Thank you.
okay, so, well, I will make one more comment if I may before we wrap this up, and that is there was another prong to this idea of the sugar-sweet beverage tax is that there would be education, and that as people stop drinking sugar-sweetened beverages, the revenue was going to go down because it's a penny per ounce of beverages sold. So if this program really is successful, the revenue should be shrinking over time. And that's not a bad thing.
Right.
But it makes it a little more difficult to do budgeting.
Yeah.
Which is why maybe it would be better to put the crossing guard program off to the general fund. But now, are we good on the motion?
Yes, I have the numbers and I have the specifics of what's being requested to be researched and developed.
Okay, so I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, please poll the commission.
Commissioner Baldwin.
Aye.
Commissioner Barnes.
Aye.
Commissioner Kerr.
Yes.
Commissioner Hiley.
Aye.
Commissioner McCroskey.
Yes.
Commissioner Zuba.
Aye.
Chair Javanda.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. All right, on to our next item, 5.3, format for presentation of police data on collisions and citations. And this is a topic that comes up routinely, so we want to take a look at is the format the right format? Is the frequency the right frequency? Do we want to have a presentation every time? Do we just want it in the agenda just for our reference that we can take a look at it whenever we want to, or do we want to just post it on the website and we have to go look for it? Those are kind of the range of ways that we could address this, but somewhat open-ended. But I think that's kind of what we want to tackle here. Can we save a few minutes at the start of the commission meeting by not having a presentation, or do we really value hearing it? So with that, any further comments from staff on this one?
No, I think that was a good summary. I don't have slides or need to run through. We can. The one thing I learned, which was new to me doing the background for this, is it looks like the TIMS, the online mapping that we rely on that we've been doing more annually to provide detail, looks like they're doing updates quarterly now. So they're, depending on the desire in terms of how often and our capacity to go in, there may be an in-between of having to wait on a cycle that has a serious lag to one that has less of a lag from the monthly that is this relatively brief snapshot of just looking at the high-level numbers.
Great. Okay, so with that, I guess I'll throw it open for questions.
Yeah, question about in the past when you have analyzed greater data, has there been success or meaningful changes that we've gotten from getting to have additional data? Maybe I open that to other commissioners too.
That's a good question. I think that's part of why we are addressing this. We do want to kind of stay informed. We have at times in the past had people come and say, oh, I saw a crash, or I got hit, or a child got hit in this crosswalk, things of that nature. So part of it is just, this is our business as a commission. We want to know about it. In the past, when I first started, we had a police lieutenant show up at all of our meetings, and they would just give us a verbal rundown on this. We didn't have the charts. They would just say, here's the status of what we've been seeing. It has become more formal, and we no longer have the active engagement of a police officer present at our meetings. But I think in answer to your question, the simple answer is it's kind of background knowledge. In terms of it leading to something directly, it hasn't. Active transportation plan, traffic calming, things like that. Those are the things that lead us to the CIP project, but those haven't arisen directly out of this report.
I don't really like the way that we're currently seeing it, where it's just sort of that the monthly, very lacking detail figure. Like that doesn't feel like it's really having a big impact on like our decision making or whatever, or even really informing us in a detailed way. I would propose that we move to like quarterly data. We're getting kind of being able to see trends, and maybe if there's like a shift in things over time, that will become more easy for us to see, and maybe we can go into a little bit more detail quarterly. And then I would also propose that maybe after we've done a significant like road work change, maybe that's just something that we kind of keep an eye on of like, has there been any big issues with that change? Like particularly I'm thinking about when we changed the corner at Solano and Masonic and Moran and Masonic. That was a big change to make it no more turn right on a red, and like how the bikes interact. So having maybe just kind of tracking that for a few months, those specific corner would be useful. But I think overall, like a quarterly report that has more detail would be more beneficial than a monthly report with minimal detail. My 2 cents.
Definitely agree. It's a lot harder to interpret any sort of valuable trends from a data that's also impacted by the amount of, for the tickets, we can see that increase, that decreasing trend, but that's because they switched to a different mode of favoring warnings over citations, and there are other things that impact these trends that we're seeing that's making it really hard to actually find any valuable information in these graphs. And without location data, I definitely agree it's hard to make any decisions based off that data.
Yeah, I had somebody email me with some of the new some of the new features in TIMS. You can now do what they call heat maps. These very nice graphical presentations of where the accidents are. So I think it would be cool if we could just plug into that directly, quarterly, see the heat maps. And depending on, of course, on how much extra burden that would be on the staff, then you could just give us a heads up and say, hey, quarterly information's out, here it is, here's the groovy heat maps, and have us check it out. And if it raises issues for us, we could potentially have something agendized to discuss those issues. But I agree, monthly, it's pretty hard to there's so much noise in the data at the monthly level. It would be better to have something smoother, like quarterly.
Gotcha. Okay.
Are we asking questions right now, or?
We're verging into discussion. So I was going to pause for a second and see if we have anyone online who has raised their hands. If they do during our further discussions, do interrupt and let us know. But with that, yeah, let's feel free to kind of move into discussion, because what I'm hearing is quarterly is probably better so we can see the trends. A little less burden on staff, hopefully, in terms of the frequency of updates. Heat map, if we can pull that easily from Tim's, would lead us to know where the hotspot locations are, which I think is useful. Knowing the impact of projects might be something that develops out of the heat maps over time. Thankfully, we don't have enough crashes to, in the span of a couple months, see big trends. That's great, but yeah, judging how effective was our project or did we do something wrong is going to take a little while to play out. But I think the heat maps are probably going to be what gets us to that. So that, that's kind of what I'm hearing. So
Another important thing that a lot of the crash data that we have is cluttered with a lot of other data of crashes that aren't crashes that we can impact or we can fix. Like someone parking and then they crash into someone while they're trying to park. That's not something we can address actively, but that's still something that shows up in this data and may lead us to false areas where we need to pay attention to where we really don't.
gotcha. And with Tim's, it filters for injuries, so that's going to, I think to your point, the crashes that we care about are going to highlight more. Okay, good. That's a good point. Other?
I agree with everything that's been said. I'm glad to see this on the agenda because it's been troublesome to me that we spend staff time primarily to generate these reports. I mean, I'm glad we're not having a lieutenant here in person, but it still represents staff time that's generating these reports. So I think quarterly is a good idea. And I totally agree with the notion that if we can get the TIMS data in, that would be very helpful because looking at that is much more informative than the data. But there is one additional point that I hesitate to even bring it up at this point because it may be completely unrelated. But I don't think we have any data on trip and fall incidents on our public walkways. And I don't see a police report generating that kind of information, but I wonder if in a future agenda we might discuss ways that could be self-reported to the city or to us as a commission, because I think that is important as well. I think there are a lot of people falling on our sidewalks, and I think we need to know about that. So those are my comments.
Good to know. Any other? Yes, Ken.
So I've been on the commission since we made the switch from our quick police visit monthly to more detailed information. And over time, I've found it very useful to help sort of give a context to what we're doing. How many of what are actually happening. And this gives us a monthly snapshot of that. Quarterly might still be useful. I thought another way to go about it would be to show the graphs as the meeting started, before and as the meeting started, to give a context, and then just put them in the consent calendar. There is probably more information available that could be useful to us in TIMS, and more ways to shave and understand the data graphically. As we've added information over time, the graphs have gotten quite dense, and following the lines up and down and trying to do your own mental sort of trend line has gotten more difficult and distracting. I think it has been useful to me to see what's been going on in the last quarter, over the quarter as it progresses. And at the same time, the data can change over time. It's not the most secure data, or it's not the most authoritative data. It doesn't include all the information that we'd like to see over the long run. And so TIMS, I think, is going to be a little more stable for that, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So that's definitely a benefit. if we're shifting the way we view the data, I would like to see some way to get that snapshot of the last quarter in detail, and then more trend than individual data over time proceeding. Because I think that's the way I want to interact with the data.
Gotcha, yes.
Yeah, my request would be a heat map and then also a stacked, like graph that has, you know, over time, what are the different incidents of different types of, you know, collisions and things. That would be really nice, because then we could see, you know, like, are we having more car on car, or bike, you know, bike versus car, pedestrian versus car. So
Right.
having that kind of a stacked bar graph over time, really useful.
So taking what we've currently got in terms of car crashes, bike crashes, ped crashes, turning it into a stacked bar chart, the different colors for each one, and we can kind of see if their trends are equivalent or if they're kind of averaging out for the totals. I like that idea.
And I think that's possible in Tim's.
With the
Or at
data
least
we've
you
already
can
got.
get tables that you can easily convert it into.
Good. Others? Okay. So just to kind of recap, since we probably don't need a motion and don't want to tie your hands with exactly what we get, the frequency, if Ken marginally dissenting, would be quarterly. Does that seem general consensus? We like Tim's for the type of data we're getting, the ability to do heat maps, hopefully the stacked bar charts. We'd like to see it on the consent calendar. If we have questions, we'll pull it, but otherwise, we'll save some time on the agenda.
I don't disagree with that, but I would add that when you get a block coming in to ask for a speed survey, and they talk about how dangerous it is, and they've seen the data on just how many injuries are happening, it's a different kind of conversation that you can have.
Yes.
So having it at every meeting has been beneficial. It also takes staff time.
We might get the trends of the last 3 months, but just report it out quarterly. So we can still refer back to it when we get those. Yeah, it's a little bit of balancing.
There's my idea again about displaying the graphs as the meeting starts, setting the context.
Sure. If we want to run it like a screensaver in the background. So, you feel like that's good guidance?
Yes, I think we can give that a try. Maybe I'll keep the monthly data as is until we get our first quarterly Tim's look, so that we're not, transitioning until we have something to transition to and see how that settles. Maybe we'll try for that monthly data, putting it on the consent calendar and not doing it as a presentation item unless the commission wants to discuss something. Given that that's how you want the future quarterly to be, we'll try that step first until we have our first quarterly presentation and see
Sounds fine.
if that is amenable.
Okay. We will do that.
Do we have a timeline for when the first quarterly presentation would be available with that data?
First one will probably take the longest to develop. I would say probably May or June for us to start, because I think we will have a pretty good sized meeting next month.
All right, once we get into a rhythm, yeah, that sounds good. All right, so that pretty much wraps up 5.3. Then item 6, the announcements. I'll start with one, which is, I believe, there's a placeholder for April 28th, ribbon cutting for the Gilman Interchange project, on which the City of Albany has been a participant. I think that's at 11 a.m. on April 28th. We'll be getting more details from Caltrans on that. But I'm certainly hoping to go because I've been part of that for a long time and looking forward to hitting that finish line.
Yeah.
And again, I know that Preston Jordan attended a great many meetings on behalf of the city as well. So there are many people who have put a lot of time and energy into that, and lots of things we do. But this is a big one, and we'll get a lot of attention. So anyone who wants should be happy to attend that one. Any other announcements?
Have a couple in terms of city council follow-ups and progression of projects that have been at the commission for discussion. Marin Phase 2 is likely going to be at the first April city council meeting. And they're likely at the second April council meeting, potentially at the second April council meeting, the follow-up conversation on the Solano Avenue bike facilities consideration for the ATP to give us council direction on what's to be analyzed in greater detail in the next phase of the ATP. The other update was just an update that for folks that have been along San Pablo Avenue, Caltrans is continuing their ADA improvements. I know there have been a number of locations where the pedestrian push button has been waiting on a move that they've done the concrete work, and the electricians have been now out there. So it was in between handoff of different contractors for a while, but it's had some action, but still needs then the final switch over and removal of the old one. So that's still ongoing, but has made some progress. Yeah, those were city announcements.
Okay. Ken?
There's going to be a Go Green mobility fair involving electric vehicles in El Cerrito on April 26th from 11 to 3 p.m. at the Plaza BART station. Sorry? That's not up to me. I have no idea, but they will have things like electric bikes and mobility items.
Very good. Okay. No other announcements, future agenda items?
We expect CIP discussion and street tree management plan at the April meeting.
Very good. All right. With that, thank you all for a good meeting. Very thoughtful input on a variety of items. Our next meeting will be Thursday, April 24th. And we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.